The newborn foal convulsed on the stable floor, its defective heart surrendering to a death sentence the doctors had pronounced inevitable. Then the ancient white stallion pressed his body against the dying baby. And as their heartbeats synchronized in defiance of medical science, Sarah watched the impossible unfold before her eyes. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning fog still clung to the rolling hills of Willow Creek Farm when Sarah Reynolds stepped out onto the weathered porch of her family's farmhouse. The air carried a peculiar stillness, broken only by the distant whinnying of horses from the stable. Sarah wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, sensing something different about this day. Something that made her heart race with both anticipation and dread. At 42, she had spent her entire life on this farm, witnessing countless births and deaths among their prized horses, but nothing had prepared her for what awaited her in the stables that morning. The call had come just after midnight. Luna, their most valuable mare, had gone into labor weeks earlier than expected. Dr. Abigail Chen, the local veterinarian, had arrived within the hour, her face grim as she assessed the situation. Now, as dawn broke over the horizon, Sarah hurried across the dew-soaked grass, her boots leaving imprints that vanished almost as quickly as they appeared. The stable door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a scene that would be etched into her memory forever. Luna lay on her side, exhausted from the night's ordeal, her once proud frame now deflated and weak. Beside her, a tiny foal struggled to breathe, its delicate chest rising and falling in irregular patterns that spoke of an internal battle no newborn should have to fight. "Sarah," Dr. Chen's voice was soft but clinical as she looked up from her examination. "I'm afraid it's not good news." Sarah knelt beside the foal, its coat still damp from birth, a beautiful chestnut color that reminded her of autumn leaves. "What's wrong with her?" she asked, already feeling a knot forming in her throat. Dr. Chen corrected gently. "It's a colt, and he has a congenital heart defect, a severe one. I can hear the murmur, and his oxygen levels are dangerously low. Honestly, I'm surprised he survived the birth." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. After 3 years of careful breeding, selecting Luna for her impeccable bloodline and championship history, this was supposed to be their miracle colt, the one to restore Willow Creek Farm to its former glory after years of financial struggle. Instead, she was facing another heartbreak, another loss. "How long does he have?" Sarah's voice cracked despite her efforts to remain composed. Dr. Chen shook her head, her expression softening with compassion. "It's hard to say. Hours, maybe days if we're lucky, without surgery, which would be extremely risky and expensive." She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Sarah nodded, understanding the reality they faced. The farm was already drowning in debt. There was no money for experimental surgeries with slim chances of success. She would stay with the foal, comfort him during his brief time in this world, and then face the inevitable. As the morning progressed, Dr. Chen administered what care she could: oxygen to ease the colt's labored breathing, fluids to prevent dehydration, but her expression remained grave. Luna, meanwhile, seemed oddly detached, keeping her distance from her offspring as if already preparing herself for his loss. "Sometimes mares know," Dr. Chen explained when Sarah mentioned Luna's behavior. "They sense when something's wrong, when their foal isn't viable. It's a protective instinct. They don't bond to avoid the pain." It made sense, Sarah thought, though it didn't make the situation any less heartbreaking. As she sat beside the struggling colt, now lying on a soft blue blanket with an oxygen mask improvised for his tiny muzzle, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the final blow to the farm. Her father had passed away last year, leaving her with mounting debts and dwindling resources. This colt represented not just new life, but hope. Hope that now seemed to be slipping away with each labored breath. Around noon, something unexpected happened. The stable door swung open, not from human hands, but pushed by the broad head of Phantom, their oldest stallion, a magnificent white Andalusian who had once been the pride of the farm. At 28, Phantom was well past his prime, his racing and breeding days long behind him. He had been kept on the farm, more out of sentiment than practicality, a living reminder of better days. "Phantom?" Sarah called, surprised. The old stallion was usually content to stay in his own stall or the north pasture. He rarely ventured to this part of the stable where the pregnant mares and new foals were kept. Phantom's ears pricked forward as he approached, his movements deliberate and measured. Luna raised her head, watching warily as the stallion made his way toward her foal. Sarah started to rise, concerned about the old horse's intentions, but something in his demeanor made her pause. With a gentleness that belied his size, Phantom lowered his head to the colt, nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of new life mixed with illness. The colt, as if sensing a presence, opened his eyes, deep brown pools that seemed too knowing for one so young, and gazed up at the white stallion standing over him. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Dr. Chen, who had returned from her truck with more supplies, stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with professional curiosity. Luna remained where she was, her maternal instincts seemingly overridden by some unspoken equine understanding. Then, to Sarah's astonishment, Phantom carefully lowered himself to the ground beside the colt. It was no small feat for a horse his age, the movement clearly causing him discomfort. But he settled his massive frame next to the tiny, struggling body with a soft, nickering sound that Sarah had never heard from him before. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Chen whispered, moving cautiously into the stable. "This isn't normal behavior, especially from a stallion with no relation to the foal." Sarah could only nod, equally mystified. As they watched, the colt's breathing, which had been erratic and strained, seemed to steady slightly in Phantom's presence. The old stallion stretched his neck, resting his head gently against the colt's side, as if lending his strength to the fragile creature. "His oxygen levels are improving," Dr. Chen noted with surprise, checking the portable monitor she had attached to the foal. "It's slight, but it's definitely an improvement." "Could it be the warmth?" Sarah suggested. "Body heat? Maybe," Dr. Chen conceded, though she looked unconvinced. "But I've never seen a response like this just from warmth. It's almost as if—" She trailed off, unwilling to voice something that sounded too fanciful for her scientific mind. As the day wore on, Phantom refused to leave the colt's side. When Dr. Chen needed to administer medication or check the foal's vitals, the old stallion would shift slightly to allow access, but never moved far. Luna, meanwhile, began to show more interest in her offspring, perhaps encouraged by Phantom's unwavering attention. By evening, the colt was still alive, defying Dr. Chen's initial prognosis. Though still critical, his condition had stabilized enough that the veterinarian felt comfortable leaving for a few hours, promising to return before midnight. "I don't want to give you false hope," she told Sarah as she packed up her bag. "His heart defect is still severe and the odds are heavily against him. But I've been a vet for 15 years, and I've learned to never say never. There's something special happening here, though I can't explain it medically." After Dr. Chen left, Sarah sat on a hay bale near the unlikely pair, the ancient stallion and the newborn colt, watching as Phantom maintained his protective vigil. In the dim light of the stable, with the sweet scent of hay and the gentle sounds of horses breathing, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace wash over her despite the circumstances. "What are you doing, old boy?" she whispered to Phantom. "What do you know that we don't?" Phantom's ear twitched in her direction, but his focus remained on the colt, his presence a silent promise that somehow, against all odds, this night would not end in tragedy. The night passed with an agonizing slowness that only those who have kept vigil over the sick or dying can truly understand. Sarah dozed intermittently on the makeshift cot she'd dragged into the stable, waking at the slightest sound from either the foal or phantom. Each time she opened her eyes, she found the old stallion in the same position, his white coat gleaming softly in the dim light, his watchful gaze never leaving the tiny colt. Dr. Chen returned shortly before midnight as promised, her expression betraying her surprise at finding the foal still alive. She performed her examination with careful hands, her movements slow and deliberate so as not to disturb Phantom, who had become oddly protective. "His vital signs are more stable than I would have expected," she admitted, studying the readouts on her portable monitor. "Still critical, but he's fighting." "Is it possible you misdiagnosed?" Sarah asked, hope creeping into her voice despite her efforts to remain realistic. Dr. Chen shook her head firmly. "No. The heart defect is real and it's severe. I can still hear the murmur clearly. What's surprising is his resilience, not the diagnosis." As if to prove her point, the colt suddenly began to struggle for breath, his small body convulsing with the effort. Sarah's heart plummeted as she watched the oxygen levels on the monitor drop precipitously. This was it, she thought, the moment they had been dreading. But then Phantom did something extraordinary. The old stallion shifted his position, carefully maneuvering his massive body until his head rested directly against the colt's chest. He began to breathe deeply, with slow, exaggerated movements, his sides expanding and contracting in a steady rhythm. The colt, as if taking instruction from this silent mentor, gradually began to match his breathing to Phantom's. Within minutes, his oxygen levels started to climb back into the safer range. Dr. Chen watched this exchange with undisguised amazement. "In all my years of practice," she whispered, "I've never seen anything like this. It's almost as if he's teaching the foal how to breathe." "Can that happen?" Sarah asked, equally awed by what she was witnessing. "Horses are incredibly intuitive animals," Dr. Chen replied, "but this goes beyond normal behavior. This is something else." By dawn, the colt had survived his first 24 hours, a milestone that Dr. Chen had initially thought impossible. Though still weak, he had managed to nurse from Luna twice, a promising sign that gave Sarah her first real flicker of hope. Phantom remained a constant presence, shifting position only to allow Luna access to her foal, then immediately resuming his protective stance. As the morning light filtered through the stable windows, Sarah stepped outside for a moment, needing fresh air and a break from the emotional intensity of the night. The farm stretched out before her, the familiar landscape both comforting and oppressive. Her father's absence was still a physical ache that caught her by surprise at the most unexpected moments. Frank Reynolds had built Willow Creek Farm from nothing, transforming a rundown property into one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the county. His sudden heart attack last year had left Sarah not only grieving, but also grappling with the harsh reality of the farm's finances. Years of bad luck, a drought that had decimated their hayfields, a respiratory illness that had swept through the stables, had forced her father to take out loans that Sarah now struggled to repay. Luna's foal was supposed to be their salvation. With his impressive bloodline, the offspring of Luna and Windchaser, a legendary racehorse whose stud fees were normally far beyond their means, the colt could have commanded a price that would have kept the bank at bay for at least another year. Now that hope seemed as fragile as the tiny life fighting for survival in the stable. The sound of tires on gravel pulled Sarah from her thoughts. A gleaming black pickup truck was making its way up the drive, and her stomach tightened with recognition. Marcus Blackwood, the last person she wanted to see today. Marcus was everything his name suggested, dark, imposing, and as unyielding as ancient wood. The owner of Blackwood Estates, a sprawling property that bordered Willow Creek to the north, he had been trying to buy her land for years. Since her father's death, his offers had become more persistent, thinly veiled beneath expressions of neighborly concern. "Sarah," he called as he stepped from his truck, his tall frame unfolding with a practiced grace that spoke of a lifetime of privilege. At 55, Marcus still cut an impressive figure, his salt and pepper hair and tailored clothes projecting an image of success that seemed designed to emphasize the stark contrast between their circumstances. "I heard about Luna's foal. Thought I'd stop by to see how things are going." News traveled fast in their small community, but even so, Sarah was surprised by how quickly word had spread. "The foal has a heart condition," she said, deciding on directness. Dr. Chen isn't optimistic. A flicker of what might have been genuine sympathy crossed Marcus's face, quickly replaced by a more calculating expression. "I'm sorry to hear that. Another setback for Willow Creek, it seems." The comment stung, though Sarah knew it wasn't entirely untrue. "We're managing," she replied stiffly. "Of course," Marcus agreed smoothly. "But my offer still stands, Sarah. In fact, given these new circumstances, I'm prepared to increase it by 10%. It would be enough to pay off your father's debts and give you a fresh start somewhere else." Somewhere else. As if she could imagine living anywhere but Willow Creek, the land that had been in her family for 3 generations. "Thank you, but no," she said, the words familiar on her tongue after months of repeating them. Marcus sighed, his expression a practiced blend of disappointment and concern. "You can't keep this up forever, Sarah. The bank won't wait much longer." Before she could respond, a call from inside the stable caught her attention. Dr. Chen was standing in the doorway, her expression urgent. "Sarah, you need to come see this." With a curt nod to Marcus, Sarah hurried back to the stable, relief at escaping the conversation mingling with fresh anxiety about the colt. As she stepped inside, however, she stopped short, astonished by what she saw. The colt was standing, wobbly and unsteady, his thin legs trembling with the effort, but standing nonetheless. Phantom stood beside him, so close that their bodies touched, providing support and balance. Luna watched from a few feet away, her ears pricked forward with interest. "This shouldn't be possible," Dr. Chen said, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking to reveal pure wonder. "A foal with his condition shouldn't have the strength to stand, not at this stage." Yet there he was, defying medical expectations, his large eyes alert and focused despite his obvious weakness. As they watched, the colt took one unsteady step, then another, Phantom moving beside him with the patience of a born teacher. Marcus had followed Sarah into the stable and now stood silently observing the scene, his expression unreadable. "Remarkable," he murmured finally. "Truly remarkable." Sarah barely registered his presence, her attention fixed on the miraculous tableau before her, a dying foal learning to walk under the guidance of an aging stallion who had no natural reason to care for him. In that moment, something shifted within her, a sudden certainty taking root. This colt would live. Against all odds, against medical science, against the crushing weight of probability, he would live, and as long as she had breath in her body, she would fight to keep him and Willow Creek safe from Marcus Blackwood and anyone else who threatened what she loved. 3 days had passed since the colt's birth, each one a victory against overwhelming odds. Dr. Chen had been making twice daily visits to the farm, documenting the foal's progress with a mix of professional interest and personal investment that went beyond her usual clinical approach. The local veterinary community had begun to take notice. Several of her colleagues had dropped by, ostensibly to offer support, but clearly drawn by curiosity about the case that defied medical explanation. "His heart murmur is still present," Dr. Chen explained to Sarah after her morning examination, "but he's compensating in ways I wouldn't have thought possible. His body is adapting, finding alternative pathways to maintain blood flow. Sarah watched as the colt, whom she had begun calling Miracle in her mind, though she hadn't yet given him an official name, nursed from Luna with growing strength. Phantom maintained his vigilant presence, never straying more than a few feet from the foal. "And you still have no explanation for this?" Sarah gestured toward the old stallion, who was currently lying beside the nursing colt, his watchful eyes tracking every movement. Dr. Chen shook her head, tucking her stethoscope back into her bag. "Scientifically, no. There are documented cases of animals forming unusual bonds, even across species, but nothing quite like this. Phantom isn't just keeping the foal company. He seems to be actively supporting his physiological functions in ways I can't fully explain." Sarah had noticed it too, the way Phantom would press his body against the colt when his breathing became labored, how he seemed to sense impending episodes before they occurred, positioning himself to provide support before any human could detect a problem. It was as if the old stallion possessed some innate understanding of the colt's condition that transcended normal equine behavior. "I've been meaning to ask you about Phantom's history," Dr. Chen said, her gaze lingering on the white stallion. "How long have you had him?" Sarah leaned against the stable wall, memories washing over her. "My father bought him 23 years ago, when I was still in high school. He was already 5 then, a champion show jumper with an impressive record. Dad paid more for him than he'd ever spent on a horse before or since." She smiled faintly at the recollection. "I remember being so angry with him for what I saw as a reckless purchase when we needed the money for other things." "What changed your mind?" "Watching them together. Dad and Phantom had this immediate connection, like they understood each other on some fundamental level. Phantom took Dad over jumps that would have terrified me, and he never faltered, never let him down." Sarah's voice softened. "After Dad's heart attack, Phantom was different, quieter, as if he knew." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Horses are incredibly perceptive, especially with people they're bonded to, and Phantom's age is remarkable in itself. 28 is well into senior territory for a horse. Has he had any health issues?" "Nothing major, some arthritis in his hind legs, but he manages it well. Dad always said Phantom would outlive us all out of sheer stubbornness." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek silver car that pulled up beside Dr. Chen's more modest vehicle. A tall woman in an expensive-looking pantsuit emerged, her polished appearance seeming out of place against the rustic backdrop of the farm. "That's Catherine Blackwood, Marcus's sister," Sarah explained, unable to keep the wariness from her voice. "She handles the legal aspects of their family business." Catherine approached with confident strides, her smile professionally warm as she extended her hand first to Sarah, then to Dr. Chen. "Ms. Reynolds, Dr. Chen, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just checking on our patient," Dr. Chen replied neutrally. "I was just leaving, actually." After the veterinarian departed with a promise to return that evening, Catherine turned her attention to Sarah. "I understand Marcus spoke with you yesterday about our offer for Willow Creek." Sarah's shoulders tensed. "He did, and my answer hasn't changed." "I thought you might say that," Catherine replied smoothly, "which is why I took the liberty of looking into your situation more thoroughly." She opened the leather portfolio she carried, extracting a document that she handed to Sarah. "This is a detailed proposal, significantly more generous than our previous offers. It includes provisions for you to remain in the farmhouse if you wish, and even retain ownership of a portion of the land for personal use." Sarah scanned the document, her heart sinking as she saw the figures. The offer was indeed substantial, enough to clear all her debts and still leave a comfortable cushion. For a brief, treacherous moment, she allowed herself to imagine the relief of being free from financial worry. "Why is this land so important to Blackwood Estates?" she asked, looking up from the paper. You have over 500 acres already. What difference does my little corner make? Catherine's professional smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Location, primarily. Your property completes a contiguous tract that would be ideal for our expansion plans. Expansion plans? Sarah repeated. You mean the resort development Marcus has been talking about for years? Among other projects, yes. The equestrian resort would bring jobs and tourism to the area, something this community desperately needs. Sarah handed the document back, her decision crystallizing with surprising clarity. No amount of money would be enough, Catherine. This land isn't just property to me. It's my heritage, my home. And these horses aren't just assets, they're family. As if on cue, a soft nickering sound drew their attention to the stable interior, where Miracle had finished nursing and was now attempting to explore his surroundings on still unsteady legs. Phantom shadowed him closely, ready to provide support if needed. The sight of them together, the ancient stallion and the fragile newborn, strengthened Sarah's resolve. Catherine observed the pair with undisguised curiosity. Marcus mentioned the foal's condition. I'm surprised he's still alive, given the prognosis. He's a fighter, Sarah said simply. Indeed. Catherine's gaze lingered on Phantom. And the stallion's behavior is unusual from what I understand. Quite the medical mystery, according to local gossip. Something in her tone put Sarah on alert. Is there a point to this conversation beyond your offer for my land? Catherine slipped the rejected proposal back into her portfolio with practiced ease. Just making conversation. Though I will say, medical anomalies have always fascinated our family. Marcus in particular has quite an interest in exceptional cases. She smiled again, this time with a coolness that didn't reach her eyes. I'll let him know your decision, though I suspect he'll want to discuss this with you personally. After Catherine left, Sarah remained in the stable doorway, watching as her car disappeared down the driveway. The encounter had left her with a vague sense of unease that she couldn't quite articulate. There had been something in Catherine's manner when she spoke about Phantom and the foal, a calculating interest that went beyond simple curiosity. Inside the stable, Miracle had tired himself out with his brief exploration and now lay curled against Phantom's side, his tiny body rising and falling with deep, restful breaths. The old stallion kept his head raised, alert and watchful, his ears swiveling to track Sarah's movements as she approached. What are they really after, Phantom? She murmured, kneeling beside them. And why do I get the feeling this isn't just about land anymore? Phantom's dark eyes met hers, wise and knowing in his weathered face. For a fleeting moment, Sarah felt the same connection her father had described all those years ago, a sense of understanding that transcended the barriers between human and horse. In that silent exchange, she found a renewed determination. Whatever game the Blackwoods were playing, she would protect what was hers. This land, these horses, and the miraculous bond that seemed to be keeping one tiny heart beating against impossible odds. That evening, as twilight settled over Willow Creek Farm, Sarah found herself rummaging through old boxes in the farmhouse attic. Catherine Blackwood's visit had left her with questions that nagged at the edges of her mind, prompting her to search through her father's belongings for anything that might shed light on the Blackwoods' peculiar interest in her land, and now, it seemed, in Phantom and Miracle. The attic was stuffy and thick with dust, illuminated only by a single bare bulb that cast long shadows across the eaves. Sarah had avoided this space since her father's death, finding the physical remnants of his life too painful to confront. Now, however, she moved with purpose, pulling out containers labeled in her father's distinctive handwriting, farm records, horse pedigrees, business correspondence. It was in the third box that she found something unexpected, a leather-bound journal she had never seen before. The cover was worn smooth by years of handling, and when she opened it, she recognized her father's handwriting filling the pages. It wasn't a business ledger as she had first thought, but a personal diary, something she hadn't known her practical, unsentimental father had kept. Sarah settled onto an old trunk, brushing away cobwebs as she began to read. The earliest entries dated back nearly 25 years, around the time her father had purchased Phantom. She skimmed through pages of daily observations about the farm and family until a particular entry caught her eye. April 17, 1998. Met with Marcus Blackwood today about the possible purchase of that white Andalusian stallion. Marcus was surprisingly reluctant to sell, despite having approached me initially. Something changed his mind when I mentioned needing a horse with heart. Almost seemed spooked by the phrase. In the end, he agreed to the sale, but insisted on a strange condition, that if I ever decided to sell the horse, I must offer him first right of refusal. I agreed, though I can't imagine ever parting with such a magnificent animal. Sarah frowned, reading the entry twice more. Her father had always told her he'd purchased Phantom from a show jumping stable in Kentucky. He'd never mentioned any prior connection to Blackwood Estates. She flipped forward several months in the journal. November 3rd, 1998. Phantom continues to exceed all expectations. His intuition on jumps is unlike anything I've seen before. It's almost as if he knows what I'm thinking before I do. Dr. Miller commented today on his extraordinary heart rate recovery after exertion. Says he's never seen a horse return to resting pulse so quickly. Marcus Blackwood stopped by again, ostensibly to see how Phantom was settling in. Asked a lot of questions about his health, particularly his heart. Beginning to wonder if there was a health issue I wasn't told about when I bought him. Sarah's pulse quickened as she continued to scan the journal, finding scattered mentions of Blackwood throughout the years, always in connection to Phantom. It seemed that Marcus had maintained an unusual interest in the stallion long after selling him, periodically inquiring about his health and performance. Then, a more recent entry caught her attention. February 12, 2021. Marcus approached me again about selling the farm. Third time this year. Offer keeps increasing, which makes me suspicious. When I firmly declined, he shifted the conversation to Phantom, suggesting that at his advanced age, the stallion might benefit from the specialized senior equine care facilities at Blackwood Estates. Told him Phantom would die of heartbreak if separated from Willow Creek. Something in his expression when I said that. Can't quite put my finger on it, not anger, something more complex, almost like fear. This entry was dated just 3 weeks before her father's fatal heart attack. Sarah closed the journal, her mind racing. What was it about Phantom that had held Marcus Blackwood's interest for over 2 decades, and why had her father never mentioned any of this to her? With the journal clutched to her chest, Sarah descended from the attic and made her way to the stable for her evening check on Miracle and Phantom. The night was clear, stars emerging in a velvet sky as crickets began their nightly chorus. In the distance, she could see the lights of Blackwood Estates glittering on the hillside, a constant reminder of the wealth and power that threatened her modest farm. Inside the stable, she found Dr. Chen completing her evening examination, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern as she listened to Miracle's heart through her stethoscope. "How is he?" Sarah asked, setting the journal aside on a hay bale. Dr. Chen straightened, her expression cautiously optimistic. "His heart rate is more stable than it was this morning. Still abnormal, but he's compensating better than I would have expected." She glanced at Phantom, who stood nearby, attentive as always. "I've been consulting with a specialist at the university about his case. Dr. Patel is an expert in equine cardiology. She's very interested in what's happening here." "Interested enough to help?" Sarah asked, hope coloring her voice. "She's offered to come examine him tomorrow if that's all right with you." She mentioned some experimental treatments that might help, though I don't want to raise false hopes. The defect is still severe." Sarah nodded, absently stroking Miracle's soft coat. The foal had grown stronger over the past few days, his coat beginning to shine with health despite his underlying condition. He was alert and responsive, nursing regularly, and even venturing short distances from his mother, always under Phantom's watchful eye. "There's something else," Dr. Chen said, her voice dropping slightly. Dr. Patel asked if we had done any genetic testing on either Miracle or Phantom. "Apparently, there's some research suggesting certain heart conditions in horses might have genetic markers that could potentially be, well, useful in understanding similar conditions in humans." Sarah's hand stilled on Miracle's back. "What kind of research?" "Comparative cardiology, studying heart conditions across species to identify common patterns or treatments." Dr. Chen hesitated. She mentioned that there's significant funding available for such research, particularly from private sources interested in medical applications. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she remembered Catherine Blackwood's words. "Medical anomalies have always fascinated our family. Marcus, in particular, has quite an interest in exceptional cases." "Did she mention who's funding this research?" Sarah asked carefully. Dr. Chen shook her head. "Just that it's a consortium of private investors with interests in both equine and human medicine." She paused, studying Sarah's face. "Is everything all right? You look troubled." Sarah considered sharing her discoveries from her father's journal, but held back, not yet ready to voice the half-formed suspicions swirling in her mind. "Just tired," she said instead. "It's been an emotional few days." After Dr. Chen left, Sarah settled onto a stool between Phantom and Miracle, the journal open on her lap. As night deepened around the farm, she read further, searching for clues in her father's words while occasionally glancing up to check on the foal. Phantom stood nearby, his white coat gleaming in the lantern light, his eyes reflecting a depth of awareness that had always set him apart from other horses. Looking at him now, Sarah could almost believe he understood the significance of what she was reading, that he knew more about his own mysterious past than she did. "What secrets are you keeping, old friend?" she murmured, reaching out to stroke his muscular neck. "And what do the Blackwoods know about you that we don't?" Phantom's only response was to lower his head gently to Miracle's side, his breath synchronizing with the foal's in that peculiar way that seemed to strengthen and sustain the younger animal. Whatever answers lay hidden in the past, one truth was undeniable. Without Phantom, Miracle would not have survived this long. Their connection, inexplicable as it might be, was keeping the foal alive against all medical expectations. Dr. Mira Patel arrived at Willow Creek Farm early the next morning, the gravel crunching under the tires of her university-issued SUV. She was younger than Sarah had expected, mid-30s perhaps, with quick, intelligent eyes that took in every detail of her surroundings. She carried herself with the confident precision of someone accustomed to academia, but her manner softened visibly when she entered the stable and saw Miracle for the first time. "Remarkable," she murmured, setting down her equipment case. "Dr. Chen described his condition to me, but seeing him alert and active like this..." She shook her head in amazement. "Based on the echocardiogram results she sent over, this foal shouldn't be thriving the way he is." Sarah stood nearby, arms crossed protectively across her chest. Though Dr. Chen had vouched for her colleague, Sarah couldn't help feeling a reflexive wariness toward this stranger who had come to examine Miracle. After her discoveries in her father's journal the previous night, her trust in outsiders had been significantly eroded. "Dr. Chen mentioned your research," Sarah said, watching as Dr. Patel began unpacking sophisticated-looking portable equipment. "Something about genetic markers for heart conditions?" Dr. Patel nodded, assembling what appeared to be a more advanced version of an ultrasound machine. My focus is on comparative cardiology, specifically unusual cases of resilience or recovery in equines with congenital defects. There are fascinating parallels with human cardiac development that could potentially inform new treatments for both species. She paused, glancing toward Phantom, who stood in his now customary position near Miracle. And I'm particularly interested in what Dr. Chen described about this older stallion's behavior. The apparent physiological synchronization between them is, well, it's unprecedented in the literature. Physiological synchronization, Sarah repeated. The matching of breathing patterns, heart rates. Dr. Chen's notes indicate that when Miracle experiences distress, Phantom positions himself in a way that seems to stabilize the foal's vital signs. Dr. Patel's eyes gleamed with scientific curiosity. I'd like to monitor both of them simultaneously, if that's all right with you. I've brought equipment that can give us a more detailed picture of what's happening. Sarah hesitated, then nodded her permission. As a researcher herself, she had earned a master's degree in agricultural science before returning to run the farm with her father. She understood the value of scientific investigation, and if Dr. Patel's work could help explain what was happening with Miracle, perhaps it could also help keep him alive. For the next hour, Sarah watched as Dr. Patel conducted a thorough examination of both horses. She attached monitoring devices to Miracle first, then to Phantom, who submitted to the procedure with unusual docility. Throughout the examination, Dr. Patel maintained a running commentary, explaining what she was seeing on her equipment displays. Miracle's ventricular septal defect is significant. There's a large opening between the lower chambers of his heart that's allowing oxygenated and deoxygenated blood to mix. Her fingers moved deftly over the ultrasound wand as she spoke. But his body is adapting remarkably well. It's almost as if, that's interesting. Sarah moved closer. What is it? There appears to be some unusual development in the surrounding cardiac tissue, compensatory growth that we wouldn't typically see at this stage. Dr. Patel's brow furrowed in concentration. I'd need to run more tests to confirm, but it looks like his heart is actually attempting to repair itself. She shifted her attention to Phantom, adjusting the ultrasound to capture images of the stallion's heart. For several minutes she worked in silence, her expression growing increasingly perplexed as she studied the readouts. This can't be right, she muttered, making adjustments to her equipment. Let me try again. Is something wrong with Phantom? Sarah asked, alarm rising in her chest. Dr. Patel shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the display. Not wrong exactly, just extraordinary. His heart structure is unusual, not pathological, but definitely atypical. The left ventricle wall is nearly twice the normal thickness, yet there's no sign of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or other disease processes that would explain it. She looked up at Sarah, excitement evident in her expression. This is a naturally occurring variation, and it's allowing his heart to function with exceptional efficiency. She continued her examination, connecting both horses to monitoring equipment that displayed their vital signs side by side. What she observed next caused her to fall completely silent, her scientific detachment momentarily shattered by genuine awe. Their heartbeats, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're synchronizing. Sarah moved to see the monitor, where two distinct heartbeat patterns were displayed, one faster and somewhat irregular, Miracle's, the other slower and powerfully steady, Phantom's. As they watched, the patterns began to influence each other, with Miracle's gradually becoming more regular, almost as if it were being guided by the stronger rhythm of Phantom's heart. I've never seen anything like this, Doctor, Patel said, her professional composure returning though her eyes remained wide with wonder. It's as if Phantom's cardiovascular system is somehow supporting or guiding miracles, almost like an external pacemaker, but without any artificial intervention. Sarah thought of what she had read in her father's journal. Dr. Miller commented today on his extraordinary heart rate recovery after exertion. Says he's never seen a horse return to resting pulse so quickly. Had Phantom's unusual heart been the reason for Marcus Blackwood's continued interest over the years? Could this be genetic? She asked, thinking aloud. Something that could be passed down? Dr. Patel considered the question. Possibly. Cardiac development has strong genetic components. If Phantom possesses a naturally occurring mutation that enhances heart function, it would be extremely valuable from a research perspective. She hesitated. Has anyone ever approached you about breeding rights or genetic testing for Phantom? The question sent a chill through Sarah. Not directly, no. But the Blackwoods, the family that originally sold Phantom to my father, have maintained an unusual interest in him over the years. Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. That doesn't surprise me. There are several private research foundations investing heavily in comparative cardiac genetics right now. The potential applications for human medicine are significant. What kind of applications? Treatments for congenital heart defects, certainly, but also possibilities for enhanced cardiac performance, resilience to heart disease, even extended longevity. Dr. Patel's voice took on a cautionary tone. The commercial and medical implications would be enormous, which means the financial incentives are equally substantial. Sarah thought of Catherine Blackwood's increasingly generous offers for the farm and her specific interest in Phantom. The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture more complex than a simple land grab for resort development. Dr. Patel, she said carefully, I'd appreciate if you kept the details of what you found here confidential for now, at least until I can better understand what's happening. The researcher looked up from her equipment, studying Sarah's face. After a moment, she nodded. Of course, patient confidentiality applies to animals too in my practice. She paused, glancing back at the monitor where the synchronized heartbeats continued their remarkable dance. But Sarah, what's happening here could be groundbreaking. It could help not only Miracle but potentially countless others, horses and humans alike. I understand that, Sarah replied. But I need to protect them both until I know exactly what we're dealing with. And who we're dealing with, she added silently, thinking of Marcus Blackwood's persistent interest and her father's cryptic journal entries. After Dr. Patel left, promising to analyze her findings and return in a few days, Sarah remained in the stable, absently stroking Miracle's neck as she processed everything she had learned. The foal had grown noticeably stronger in the weeks since his birth, his coat taking on a healthy sheen that belied the serious condition of his heart. He still had episodes of distress when his breathing would become labored and his small body would tremble with the effort of circulating blood through his imperfect heart. But these episodes were becoming less frequent and severe, and always, without fail, Phantom would be there. A silent, steadfast presence that seemed to emanate strength into the struggling foal through some invisible connection that science was only beginning to understand. What do the Blackwoods want with you? Sarah murmured, her gaze shifting from Miracle to Phantom. The old stallion's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, his intelligent eyes meeting hers with an expression that seemed almost knowing. The ringing of her cell phone interrupted her thoughts. The screen displayed a number she didn't recognize, and she answered with a cautious hello. Sarah Reynolds? The voice was elderly but clear, with a slight tremor that suggested age rather than uncertainty. My name is Howard Mitchell. I worked as head groom at Blackwood Estates about 25 years ago. I understand you've been asking questions about a white Andalusian stallion. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. How did you know that? Small community, Howard replied simply. And I still have friends who work for the Blackwoods. Word gets around. There was a pause. I have information that might interest you about the horse's origins and why Marcus has never stopped keeping tabs on him, but I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Sarah hesitated, weighing the risk of meeting a stranger against the potential answers he might provide. Where would you like to meet? There's a diner called Maggie's about halfway between your place and town. I can be there in an hour if that works for you. Sarah agreed, disconnecting the call with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. She checked on Luna, who was resting comfortably in a neighboring stall, then gave final instructions to Miguel, the farmhand who would watch over things in her absence. Call me immediately if anything changes with Miracle, she emphasized. And don't let anyone near him or Phantom, especially not anyone from Blackwood Estates. Miguel nodded solemnly, his weathered face grave. He had worked at Willow Creek since Sarah was a child, and was as devoted to the farm and its animals as she was. Don't worry, Miss Sarah. Nobody gets past me. The drive to Maggie's diner took Sarah along winding country roads that cut through the heart of horse country. On either side of the asphalt stretched vast, meticulously maintained pastures, where valuable thoroughbreds grazed behind pristine white fences. A landscape of privilege that had always made Willow Creek Farm seem modest by comparison. Maggie's was a local institution, a chrome and vinyl throwback to the 1950s that served the best pancakes in 3 counties. At mid-morning, the breakfast rush had subsided, leaving only a few occupied booths. In the farthest corner sat an elderly man nursing a cup of coffee, his gnarled hands wrapped around the mug as if drawing warmth from it, despite the mild spring temperature. Mr. Mitchell? Sarah approached the booth, extending her hand. Howard Mitchell looked up, his rheumy blue eyes appraising her with surprising sharpness. Frank's daughter, he said, nodding as if confirming something to himself. You've got his look about you. Same stubborn chin. He gestured to the seat across from him. Sit down, Miss Reynolds, and it's just Howard. After ordering coffee, Sarah got straight to the point. You said you have information about Phantom, the white Andalusian my father bought from Blackwood Estates. Howard's fingers drummed against his mug, a subtle sign of nervousness. What do you know about the Blackwood family's business interests? He asked instead of answering directly. Sarah frowned. They own the largest horse farm in the county. They're developing some kind of equestrian resort, and apparently they're involved in medical research of some kind. Medical research, Howard echoed, a hint of bitterness in his voice. That's one way to put it. The Blackwoods have been obsessed with breeding the perfect horse for 3 generations, not just for performance, but for specific physiological traits. Marcus's grandfather started it back in the 1940s, selecting for heart and lung capacity, muscle recovery, endurance. That's not unusual in horse breeding, Sarah pointed out. No, but the methods and the extent were unusual. And the secrecy. Howard leaned forward, lowering his voice, though no one was within earshot. About 30 years ago, Marcus's father brought in scientists, geneticists, physiologists. They established a research facility on the property, very hush-hush, started experimenting with selective breeding techniques, pushing the boundaries of what was considered ethical. Sarah's coffee arrived, but she ignored it, focused intently on Howard's words. What does this have to do with Phantom? Phantom, though he wasn't called that then, was one of their most successful outcomes, a horse with extraordinary cardiovascular efficiency, capable of physical feats that should have been impossible. Howard's eyes took on a distant look as if seeing into the past. I've worked with hundreds of horses in my life, Miss Reynolds, but I never saw anything like him. His recovery time after exertion was almost immediate, his endurance seemingly limitless. So why did they sell him to my father? Sarah asked, the question that had been nagging at her since reading the journal entries. Howard's expression darkened. They didn't intend to. Phantom was meant to be their foundation stallion, the cornerstone of a breeding program that would revolutionize equine genetics. But something went wrong in their calculations. He paused, taking a sip of his now cold coffee. Phantom proved to be sterile. Sterile? Sarah repeated, surprised. But he's a stallion. He's never shown any signs of... Oh, he has all the physical characteristics and behaviors of a stallion, Howard interrupted. But for some reason, probably related to whatever they did to create his unique physiology, he can't sire offspring. After dozens of failed breeding attempts with their best mares, the Blackwoods gave up. Marcus's father wanted to euthanize him, saw him as a failed experiment, but Marcus convinced him to sell the horse instead, on the condition that they maintained the right to monitor him throughout his life. Sarah sat back, absorbing this information. So all these years, Marcus has been keeping tabs on Phantom to study his development? Howard nodded. And his longevity. Most horses don't live to 28, especially not in the kind of physical condition Phantom has maintained. The data from his lifespan alone would be valuable to their research. But why the sudden intensity of interest now? Marcus has been practically hounding me to sell since my father died. Howard hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. There are rumors, among those still working at the estate, that the Blackwoods have made a breakthrough, something that might allow them to overcome the fertility issue in horses with Phantom's genetic makeup. His gaze was steady, significant. If they could get Phantom back and successfully breed him now, using whatever new techniques they've developed, they could finally create the bloodline they've been working toward for decades, Sarah finished, the implications dawning on her with chilling clarity. Exactly. Howard's voice dropped even lower. And there's another rumor, that they've secured a major investment from a pharmaceutical company interested in the potential human applications of their research. The amount of money involved would make the value of your entire farm look like pocket change. Sarah thought of Miracle, of the inexplicable bond between the foal and Phantom that seemed to be healing his damaged heart. Was this connected to whatever genetic modifications the Blackwoods had engineered? Could Phantom's unique physiology somehow be influencing Miracle's development? "Thank you for telling me this," she said finally, reaching for her untouched coffee. "But I have to ask, why are you sharing this information with me? Aren't you concerned about the Blackwoods finding out?" A ghost of a smile crossed Howard's weathered face. "I'm 82 years old, Miss Reynolds. What exactly can Marcus Blackwood do to me at this point?" The smile faded, replaced by a solemn expression. "Besides, I owe it to your father. Frank was a good man, one of the few who treated horses as something more than commodities or investments. He gave Phantom the life he deserved." As Sarah drove back to Willow Creek, her mind raced with everything she had learned. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus's persistent interest in buying the farm, Catherine's calculated reference to medical anomalies, the strange bond between Phantom and Miracle that defied scientific explanation. But the emerging picture was more complex and disturbing than she had imagined, involving genetic experimentation, corporate pharmaceutical interests, and a decades-long quest that seemed to blur the lines between cutting-edge research and unsettling obsession. Sarah's truck kicked up dust as she sped down the gravel drive to Willow Creek Farm, her mind still processing Howard Mitchell's revelations. The familiar sight of the weathered barn and white fences usually brought her comfort, but today they only intensified her sense of vulnerability. The farm that had always been her sanctuary now felt exposed, its boundaries suddenly permeable to threats she was only beginning to understand. As she pulled up to the house, her heart sank. A black Range Rover was parked in front of the stable, Marcus Blackwood's vehicle. She slammed her truck into park and hurried toward the stable, anger and fear battling for dominance in her chest. Inside, she found Marcus standing near Miracle's stall, engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation with Miguel. The farmhand's posture was rigid, his arms crossed defensively as he positioned himself between Marcus and the horses. "Just a friendly visit to check on the foal's progress," Marcus was saying, his tone reasonable though his eyes were cold. "Surely there's no harm in that." "Miss Sarah said no visitors," Miguel replied firmly. "Especially from Blackwood Estates." "Sarah." Marcus turned at the sound of her footsteps, his expression shifting to one of practiced cordiality. "I was just explaining to your employee that I stopped by to see how your miracle foal is doing. Word travels fast about such unusual cases." Sarah moved to stand beside Miguel, silently thanking him for his loyalty. "You could have called first, Marcus. This isn't a good time for unexpected visitors." Marcus smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "My apologies. I was in the area and thought I'd save you a phone call." His gaze drifted to Phantom, who had positioned himself protectively near Miracle. "Your old stallion seems quite attached to the foal. Fascinating behavior, especially given they're not related." The casual observation carried an undercurrent of knowledge that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She thought of what Howard had told her, about Phantom being a product of the Blackwood's genetic experiments, about his extraordinary heart, and the sterility that had led to his sale. "Miguel, would you mind checking on Luna?" Sarah asked, not taking her eyes off Marcus. "I think she needs fresh water." The farmhand hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave her alone with Blackwood, but eventually nodded and moved toward the mare's stall at the far end of the stable. Once he was out of earshot, Sarah crossed her arms. "What do you really want, Marcus? This isn't about a neighborly visit." Something shifted in Marcus's demeanor, the veneer of politeness giving way to a more focused intensity. "Direct, just like your father." He glanced around the stable, his gaze calculating. "All right, Sarah, I'll be equally direct. I've made you several generous offers for this property, each one significantly above market value, yet you continue to refuse. This farm is my heritage. It's not for sale." "Everything has a price," Marcus countered smoothly, "but I'm beginning to understand that for you, the price might not be strictly financial." He stepped closer to Miracle's stall, studying the foal with clinical interest. "What if I told you I could save him?" Sarah stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "Your foal's heart condition. I know it's serious, probably fatal without intervention. And I know that for some inexplicable reason, Phantom seems to be stabilizing him." Marcus turned to face her fully. "What if I could offer you access to medical resources that could permanently repair the defect? Not just manage it, but cure it?" The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and dangerous. Sarah thought of Miracle's struggles, the episodes of distress that, while decreasing in frequency, still threatened his fragile life. "And what would you want in exchange?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Phantom," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Return him to Blackwood Estates where he was born. We have a state-of-the-art veterinary facility now, specialized care for senior horses. He'd be well treated, I assure you." "And extensively studied," Sarah added, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Monitored, tested, maybe even subjected to whatever new breeding techniques you've developed. Is that it, Marcus? You want to see if you can finally get viable offspring from your failed experiment?" Marcus's expression hardened, confirming her suspicions without him saying a word. "I see you've been doing some research. Or perhaps someone's been talking out of turn." His gaze flicked briefly toward the farm entrance as if considering who might have betrayed his family's secrets. "Regardless, my offer stands. The foal gets cutting-edge treatment that will save his life, and Phantom returns to where he belongs. Where he belongs is here, Sarah retorted. My father gave him a home when your family was ready to euthanize him for not meeting your expectations. He's not going anywhere. A cold smile played at the corners of Marcus's mouth. Your father never told you the full story, did he? About the contract he signed when he purchased Phantom? Sarah's stomach clenched. What contract? A standard agreement with a special clause, Marcus explained, satisfaction evident in his tone. If certain conditions were met, Blackwood Estates retained the right to repurchase the horse at a predetermined price. One of those conditions was if Phantom ever demonstrated specific physiological capabilities of interest to our research program. That's absurd, Sarah protested, though doubt had begun to creep in. Her father had been meticulous about business matters, but the journal entries suggested there might have been aspects of the Phantom purchase he hadn't fully disclosed. Even if such an agreement existed, it would have expired by now. The clause has no expiration date, Marcus replied smoothly. I have the original contract in my office. I'd be happy to have my lawyers review it with you. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion from Miracle's stall drew their attention. The foal had suddenly collapsed, his small body convulsing as he struggled to breathe. Phantom immediately moved closer, nickering softly as he positioned himself alongside Miracle. Miguel! Sarah called urgently, rushing to the stall. Call Dr. Chen. Tell her it's an emergency. Marcus remained where he was, watching with undisguised interest as the crisis unfolded. Sarah knelt beside Miracle, her hands trembling as she checked his vital signs the way Dr. Chen had taught her. His pulse was rapid and irregular, his breathing shallow and labored. Phantom lowered himself to the ground beside the foal, pressing his body gently against Miracle's in what had become a familiar pattern. Sarah watched, her heart in her throat, as the old stallion seemed to deliberately slow and deepen his own breathing, his chest expanding and contracting with exaggerated movements. Remarkable, Marcus murmured, his clinical tone at odds with the life-or-death drama playing out before them. The physiological synchronization is even more pronounced than I expected. Sarah shot him a furious glance. This isn't a research opportunity, Marcus. He's dying. Not necessarily, Marcus replied, his eyes never leaving the two horses. Watch. As if on cue, Miracle's convulsions began to subside. His breathing, still labored, gradually started to match Phantom's deeper rhythm. Within minutes, the worst of the episode had passed, though the foal remained weak and trembling. Miguel returned, breathless from running. Dr. Chen is on her way. She said to keep him warm and monitor his breathing. Sarah nodded, relief washing over her as Miracle's condition continued to stabilize. She stroked his neck gently, murmuring words of encouragement, acutely aware of Marcus's calculating gaze. My offer still stands, he said quietly as he turned to leave. But I should warn you, Sarah, that contract is legally binding. If you won't accept a generous arrangement, we're prepared to enforce our rights through other channels. He paused at the stable door. Think about what's best for the foal. Without proper medical intervention, these episodes will continue, and eventually, one of them will be fatal. After he left, Sarah remained kneeling beside Miracle, one hand on his neck, the other resting on Phantom's strong shoulder. The threat in Marcus's parting words echoed in her mind, along with the disturbing claim about a contract she'd never known existed. What am I going to do? She whispered, more to herself than to the horses beside her. But Phantom's dark, knowing eyes met hers with such intelligence that for a moment she almost expected him to answer. Dr. Chen arrived 20 minutes after Marcus left, medical bag in hand and worry etched across her face. By then, Miracle had stabilized further, though he remained worryingly weak. The veterinarian conducted a thorough examination, her movements efficient but gentle, as she listened to the foal's heart and checked his vital signs. This was his worst episode yet, she concluded, administering a mild sedative to help the foal rest. His heart is struggling to maintain adequate circulation. The fact that he recovered at all is... She glanced at Phantom, who hadn't moved from Miracle's side. Well, it's medically inexplicable. Sarah leaned against the stall door, exhaustion and worry weighing on her like physical burdens. Dr. Patel mentioned something about his heart attempting to repair itself. Is that possible? In theory, yes. There are documented cases of cardiac tissue remodeling in response to defects, but it's rare and usually insufficient to fully correct serious problems. Dr. Chen packed her stethoscope away, her expression troubled. Sarah, I need to be honest with you. Despite his remarkable resilience so far, Miracle is living on borrowed time. Without surgical intervention, his heart simply won't be able to support his growth and development indefinitely. And the surgery? What are his chances? Dr. Chen hesitated. It's high risk, especially for a foal this young. The success rate is under 50%, and the cost is substantial. We'd need to transport him to the Equine Medical Center at the university, keep him there for weeks of recovery. The financial implications hung unspoken between them. Sarah knew that such a procedure would cost tens of thousands of dollars, money she simply didn't have. Even if she mortgaged the farm, took out loans she could never repay, the odds would still be against Miracle's survival. Marcus Blackwood was here, Sarah said finally, watching Dr. Chen's reaction carefully. He offered to provide medical treatment for Miracle, cutting-edge treatment that he claimed could cure him. Dr. Chen's expression shifted subtly. Did he specify what kind of treatment? No, but he wanted Phantom in exchange. Sarah recounted her conversation with Marcus, including his claims about a contract that gave Blackwood Estates the right to reclaim Phantom under certain conditions. When she finished, Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving between Phantom and Miracle. The Blackwoods do have an advanced research facility, she admitted finally. There have been rumors in veterinary circles about their work in regenerative medicine for cardiac conditions. Some colleagues who've consulted there have signed extensive non-disclosure agreements, but the whispers suggest they're doing things that are years ahead of mainstream treatment options. Do you think they could really save him? Dr. Chen sighed. Possibly. Their resources are certainly beyond anything I can offer. She placed a hand on Sarah's arm. But Sarah, I have to caution you. Whatever they're doing hasn't gone through the normal channels of peer review and regulatory approval. There are ethical considerations, unknown risks, and they want Phantom as payment, Sarah murmured, reaching out to stroke the old stallion's neck. I can't do that to him. My father would never forgive me. After Dr. Chen left with a promise to return in the morning, Sarah made her way to her father's study, a small wood-paneled room she had largely avoided since his death. If there was a contract related to Phantom, that's where it would be. For hours, she sifted through filing cabinets and drawers, methodically working her way through decades of farm records. It was well past midnight when she found it. A leather portfolio tucked at the back of the bottom drawer of her father's desk, labeled simply, Phantom 1998. Inside was a set of documents that confirmed her worst fears. The purchase agreement for Phantom included a special clause, just as Marcus had claimed. Blackwood Estates retained the right to repurchase the horse at 3 times the original sale price if he ever exhibited extraordinary physiological capabilities of particular research interest, specifically including unusual cardiac efficiency and the ability to influence the physiological functions of other equines. Sarah read the clause twice, her blood running cold. The language was deliberately vague, yet precise enough to encompass exactly what was happening between Phantom and Miracle. Her father had signed it, presumably believing such conditions would never be met, or perhaps never fully understanding what they meant. There was more. A series of letters exchanged between her father and Marcus over the years, growing increasingly tense in tone. In the most recent, dated just weeks before his death, her father had written, "I will not subject Phantom to your experiments, regardless of any contract. Some things matter more than legal technicalities. This horse has given me 10 championships and 20 years of loyalty. I owe him peace in his final years." Marcus's reply was coldly formal. "The agreement stands, Frank. My father may have let sentiment cloud his judgment in the past, but I assure you I will not make the same mistake. Should the conditions be met, we will exercise our rights." Sarah set the documents aside, her mind racing. The contract appeared legally binding, though perhaps contestable given its unusual nature. But fighting the Blackwoods in court would be costly, potentially ruinous, and time was something Miracle didn't have to spare. She returned to the stable, needing to check on Miracle one last time before attempting to sleep. The foal was resting peacefully, his breathing more regular than it had been during the crisis. Phantom lay beside him, maintaining that mysterious connection that seemed to be keeping Miracle alive against all medical expectations. As Sarah watched them, an idea began to take shape in her mind, a desperate, possibly foolish plan, but one that might offer a way forward. If Marcus wanted Phantom for his research, there might be leverage there, a negotiation rather than a surrender. She was startled from her thoughts by the sound of tires on gravel, an unusual occurrence at nearly 1 a.m. Stepping outside, she saw not the sleek vehicles of the Blackwoods, but a modest sedan she recognized as belonging to Dr. Patel. The researcher emerged from her car, looking apologetic about the late hour. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Sarah, but I couldn't wait until morning. Something's come up that you need to know about." In the dim light of the yard, Dr. Patel's expression was grave. "I've been analyzing the data I collected from Phantom and Miracle, and I've discovered something extraordinary. Something that explains why the Blackwoods are so interested." She handed Sarah a tablet displaying complex charts and waveform patterns. "This shows the electromagnetic patterns emitted by both horses' hearts. Most living creatures generate these fields, but Phantom's is unusually strong and coherent, and when he's near Miracle, something remarkable happens. His field appears to entrain Miracle's, gradually guiding the foal's cardiac rhythm into a more stable pattern." Sarah stared at the display, trying to make sense of the technical information. "You're saying Phantom is somehow healing Miracle's heart?" "Not healing exactly, more like supporting and guiding it, creating a template that Miracle's developing heart is following." Dr. Patel's eyes shone with scientific excitement. "It's as if Phantom is providing an external blueprint for proper cardiac function, and Miracle's heart is responding by attempting to restructure itself accordingly." Is that even possible? There's emerging research on biofield interactions between organisms, but nothing that approaches this level of direct physiological influence. Dr. Patel hesitated. "Sarah, there's more. I received a call tonight from a colleague at the NIH. The Blackwoods have just secured a major research grant in partnership with Vanguard Pharmaceuticals, over $50 million for innovative approaches to cardiac regeneration." They didn't name their research subjects, but the timing can't be coincidental. Sarah thought of Marcus's confidence when he'd made his offer, the cold calculation in his eyes as he watched Miracle's crisis. They're not just after Phantom, are they? They want Miracle too, to study their connection. Dr. Patel nodded grimly. "I believe so. And with that kind of financial backing, they'll have resources far beyond what you could hope to match in any legal battle." Dawn broke over Willow Creek Farm with the pale, tentative light of early spring. Sarah had barely slept, spending most of the night in the stable beside Miracle and Phantom, her mind churning with the implications of Dr. Patel's revelations and the binding contract she had discovered among her father's papers. By morning, exhaustion had crystallized into resolve. She would confront the Blackwoods directly, on her terms rather than theirs. First, she called her father's old attorney, Martin Weber, and arranged to meet him later that day. Then she contacted Dr. Chen and Dr. Patel, asking them to document everything they had observed about Phantom and Miracle's unusual connection. If it came to a legal battle, she would need all the evidence and expertise she could gather. Miguel arrived at 7, his weathered face creasing with concern when he saw her. "You look like you haven't slept, Miss Sarah." "I'll be fine," she assured him, handing him a list of instructions. "I need you to stay with the horses today. Don't let anyone near them, and I mean anyone, unless Dr. Chen is with them. I'm going to Blackwood Estates." Miguel's eyes widened. "To see Marcus Blackwood, is that wise, Miss Sarah?" "Probably not," she admitted, "but I'm tired of reacting to his moves. It's time to make some of my own." After a quick shower and change of clothes, Sarah stood at Miracle's stall one last time before leaving. The foal was awake, standing more steadily than he had after yesterday's crisis. He nickered softly when he saw her, moving toward the stall door with Phantom shadowing his every step. "I'm going to fix this," she promised, reaching out to stroke both horses. Somehow. The drive to Blackwood Estates took 20 minutes, each passing mile ratcheting up Sarah's determination. The sprawling property was everything Willow Creek wasn't. Pristine, manicured with an imposing stone entrance gate and security cameras tracking her approach. A paved driveway wound through immaculate grounds to a gleaming modern structure that looked more like a corporate headquarters than a traditional horse farm. Sarah parked in front of the main building, ignoring the designated visitor spaces. She had barely stepped from her truck when a security guard approached, his expression professionally neutral. "Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Blackwood is expecting you." Of course he was. News traveled fast in their small community, and Marcus Blackwood had probably been anticipating her arrival since his visit to Willow Creek yesterday. The realization only strengthened her resolve. The guard led her through a sleek reception area into a wood-paneled office where Marcus sat behind an imposing desk, his sister Catherine standing beside him. Neither seemed surprised by her unannounced visit. "Sarah," Marcus greeted her, gesturing to a chair. "I thought we might be seeing you today." She remained standing. "I found the contract." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Marcus's face. "Then you understand the legal situation. Blackwood Estates has the right to repurchase Phantom under the current circumstances." "What I understand," Sarah replied evenly, "is that you engineered those circumstances. You created Phantom as part of some genetic experiment, then maintained an interest in him for decades despite claiming he was a failure. Now suddenly he's valuable to you again because of his connection to Miracle." Catherine stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "The origins of Phantom's unique physiology are irrelevant to the contract, Sarah. The fact is, your father signed a legally binding agreement that gives us specific rights under these exact conditions. And you've secured $50 million from Vanguard Pharmaceuticals to study the implications," Sarah added, watching their reaction closely. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not just horses, but potential human applications." A brief look passed between the siblings, surprise quickly masked. Marcus recovered first, his tone measured. "You've done your homework. Yes, there are potentially significant medical applications. Phantom's unique cardiac properties, combined with this unprecedented ability to influence another heart's function, could revolutionize treatments for congenital heart defects." "Then you need both horses," Sarah stated flatly. "Not just Phantom, but Miracle too." "The contract only specifies Phantom," Catherine interjected, but Marcus held up a hand to silence her. "You're right," he admitted. The full research value lies in studying both horses and their interaction. We were planning to offer you a separate agreement for Miracle, a generous one. Sarah thought of the foal's fragile body, his struggle to survive against overwhelming odds, and the experimental procedures that might await him at Blackwood Estates. She thought, too, of Phantom, the loyal companion who had meant so much to her father, now reduced to a research subject in his final years. "I have a counter-proposal," she said, surprising even herself with the steadiness of her voice. "A collaboration rather than a surrender." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Miracle stays at Willow Creek. Your researchers, including Dr. Patel, if she's willing, can conduct their studies there in an environment where he's comfortable and safe. Phantom stays too, but you get full access to both horses for your research, as long as it doesn't harm either of them." "And in exchange?" Catherine asked skeptically. "You provide the medical treatment Miracle needs, whatever cutting-edge procedures your facilities can offer. You cover all costs associated with his care, and you establish a formal research partnership with Willow Creek Farm with appropriate financial compensation for our contribution to your project." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "You're proposing to turn your struggling farm into a research outpost? I'm proposing a compromise that keeps my horses safe while allowing your research to proceed." Sarah met his gaze directly. "And I'm offering it because I have something you need, not just Phantom but Miracle too, in the environment where their connection has flourished." The siblings exchanged another look, this one longer and more calculating. Catherine seemed ready to dismiss the idea outright, but Marcus appeared to be considering it seriously. "We would need guaranteed access, comprehensive monitoring capabilities," he said slowly, "and final authority on treatment decisions for Miracle." "Shared authority," Sarah countered, "with independent veterinary oversight from Dr. Chen." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah's phone rang, Miguel's number flashing on the screen. With a sense of foreboding, she answered. "Miss Sarah," Miguel's voice was urgent, panicked. "It's Miracle. He's much worse. Dr. Chen is here, but she says—" His voice broke. "She says you should come quickly." The world seemed to stop for a moment, all of Sarah's carefully constructed plans crumbling around her. "I'm on my way," she managed, ending the call with trembling fingers. "Miracle's crashing," she told the Blackwoods, already moving toward the door. "I have to go." "Wait." Marcus stood abruptly. "Our medical facility is less than 5 minutes from here, fully equipped with staff on call. We can help him." Sarah hesitated, torn between suspicion of Marcus's motives and desperate concern for Miracle. "Why would you help when you could just wait for him to die and claim Phantom under the contract?" "Because a dead foal is scientifically worthless," Marcus replied bluntly. "And because I'm not the monster you think I am, Sarah. This research could help countless children born with heart defects. Yes, there's profit involved, but there's also genuine medical value." The seconds stretched between them, a chasm of mistrust that seemed impossible to bridge. Then Sarah made her decision. "Call your medical team," she said tersely. "Tell them to meet us at Willow Creek." As she raced back to her truck, Marcus following close behind, Sarah could only pray she hadn't made a fatal mistake in trusting the man who had been her adversary. But with Miracle's life hanging in the balance, she had run out of better options. The scene at Willow Creek Farm was one of controlled chaos when Sarah and Marcus arrived. Dr. Chen's truck was parked haphazardly near the stable entrance, and beyond it, an unmarked van that Sarah assumed contained the Blackwood medical team. She sprinted toward the stable, heart pounding with fear for what she might find inside. Miracle lay on his side in the stall, his small body convulsing with the effort to breathe. Around him, Dr. Chen worked alongside 2 professionals in medical scrubs, their movements precise and urgent as they attached monitoring equipment and administered medication through an IV line. Phantom stood nearby, his posture tense, ears forward, eyes fixed on the struggling foal with an intensity that seemed almost human in its concern. Ventricular arrhythmia. One of the Blackwood team, a woman with silver-streaked hair and swift, confident hands, explained to Sarah, "His heart is beating irregularly and can't pump blood effectively. We need to stabilize him before we can attempt any corrective procedure." Sarah nodded numbly, pressing herself against the stall wall to stay out of their way. Marcus remained at her side, his expression grave as he watched his team work. "Dr. Foster is the best cardiologist in the state," he said quietly. "If anyone can save him, she can." Despite the reassurance, Sarah could see the tension in Dr. Foster's face as she studied the cardiac monitor. Miracle's condition was deteriorating rapidly, his oxygen levels dropping despite the supplemental oxygen they were providing. "We're losing him," Dr. Foster announced, her voice clinically detached, though her eyes betrayed her concern. "The arrhythmia isn't responding to medication. We need to prepare for defibrillation." As the team scrambled to set up the equipment, a strange calm settled over Sarah. In that moment of crisis, the complexities of contracts and research grants and farm finances seemed to fall away, leaving only what truly mattered, the small life fighting for survival before her eyes, and the bond that had sustained him thus far. "Wait," she said, stepping forward. "Let Phantom closer." Dr. Foster looked up sharply. "Ms. Reynolds, we don't have time for—" "Trust me," Sarah interrupted, meeting the doctor's gaze with steady determination. "Just give them a chance." After a moment's hesitation, Dr. Foster nodded and the team stepped back slightly, creating space while keeping the monitoring equipment in place. Sarah approached Phantom, placing a gentle hand on his neck. "He needs you now," she whispered. "More than ever." As if understanding her words, Phantom moved forward with deliberate steps. The medical team watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity as the old stallion lowered himself carefully to the ground beside Miracle, positioning his body against the foals as he had done so many times before. The effect was not immediate. For several agonizing moments, Miracle continued to struggle, his vital signs unstable. Then gradually, something remarkable began to happen. The erratic spikes on the cardiac monitor began to even out, falling into a more regular pattern that closely matched the strong, steady rhythm of Phantom's heart. "It's working," Dr. Chen breathed, her professional composure momentarily cracking with wonder. "Look at the waveform stabilization." Dr. Foster leaned forward, her skepticism giving way to intense scientific interest as she studied the monitor. "I've never seen anything like this. The entrainment is almost perfect. It's as if the stronger heart is providing a template for the weaker one to follow." For nearly an hour they watched this extraordinary process unfold. Phantom remained motionless except for his deep, rhythmic breathing, while Miracle's condition slowly but steadily improved. The foal's oxygen levels rose, his heart rate stabilized, and eventually the convulsions ceased entirely. "He's out of immediate danger," Dr. Foster announced finally, her clinical tone softened by genuine amazement. "But the underlying defect remains. Without intervention, this will happen again, possibly worse next time." Marcus, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "What kind of intervention are we talking about?" Dr. Foster exchanged a glance with her colleague before answering. "The regenerative cardiac therapy we've been developing might work. It uses stem cells to promote new tissue growth and repair damaged structures. We've had promising results in the lab, but we haven't progressed to clinical trials yet." "Would it be safe for him?" Sarah asked, her voice small but steady. "There are risks," Dr. Foster admitted. "But given his condition and what we've just witnessed with Phantom's influence, I believe Miracle is an ideal candidate. The physiological synchronization we're seeing might actually enhance the therapy's effectiveness." Sarah looked at Marcus, understanding passing between them without words. The research opportunity this presented was unprecedented, not just Phantom's extraordinary heart, but the symbiotic relationship between the two horses that seemed to transcend normal physiological boundaries. "I want to modify our earlier discussion," she said quietly. "If your team can save Miracle, I'll agree to the research partnership we discussed. But both horses stay at Willow Creek, where they're comfortable and where their bond has flourished. Your researchers have full access, but their well-being comes first." Marcus considered her proposal, his calculating gaze moving from the horses to the monitoring equipment displaying their synchronized heart rhythms. "You drive a hard bargain, Sarah Reynolds," he said finally, "but I think we can make this work, for the horses, for the research, and for Willow Creek Farm." 3 months later, Sarah stood at the fence of the south pasture, watching as Miracle raced across the green expanse with the boundless energy of a healthy young colt. His coat gleamed chestnut in the summer sun, his movements fluid and confident, betraying no hint of the heart defect that had nearly claimed his life. The regenerative therapy developed by the Blackwood research team had worked beyond anyone's expectations. Guided by Phantom's extraordinary cardiac field, the stem cells had integrated perfectly, rebuilding Miracle's damaged heart structures with a precision that Dr. Foster called nothing short of miraculous. Willow Creek Farm had transformed as well. The mortgage had been paid off as part of the research partnership agreement, and the once struggling operation now included a state-of-the-art equine medical facility where Dr. Chen worked alongside the Blackwood team, studying the unique bond between Phantom and Miracle while providing care for horses from across the region. "They look good together," Marcus commented, joining Sarah at the fence. Their relationship had evolved into an uneasy alliance over the past months, mutual respect gradually replacing the antagonism that had defined their earlier interactions. "They do," Sarah agreed, watching as Phantom cantered alongside his young charge, their movements synchronized in a way that seemed to reflect their deeper physiological connection. "The preliminary results from our study are remarkable," Marcus continued. "Dr. Foster believes we've identified the genetic factors responsible for Phantom's unique cardiac properties. The implications for human medicine are substantial, particularly for children born with heart defects similar to Miracle's." Sarah nodded, thinking of the photos Dr. Foster had shown her just yesterday. Images of human cardiac cells in the laboratory, responding to the same field entrainment principles they had observed between Phantom and Miracle. "My father would be proud," she said softly, more to herself than to Marcus. "He always said Phantom had heart like no other horse he'd ever known. He just didn't realize how literal that was." As the sun began to set over Willow Creek Farm, casting long shadows across pastures that had been in her family for generations, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The farm would continue, evolving into something her father couldn't have imagined but would have approved of nonetheless, a place where horses were still valued, not just for their bloodlines or performance, but for the mysteries and miracles their hearts contained. In the pasture, Phantom and Miracle had stopped running and now stood close together, the ancient white stallion and the young chestnut colt, connected by something science could measure but not fully explain. Watching them, Sarah understood that some bonds transcend understanding, between horses, between generations, between hearts that find in each other exactly what they need to heal and grow stronger.